welcome to the Evangelist Nick Garrett channel. This message tonight is just for Americans. I have a special message just for you. The famous actor Denzel Washington is famously quoted as saying, "If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read the newspaper, you're misinformed." But see, we're innocent. It's only been in the last 30 years this digitizing has occurred. Before that in America, we only ever knew about Catholic or Protestant lineage. Protestant including any non-Catholic denominations, confessional, Pentecostal, Presbyterian, you name it. Well, now for the first time we're learning that the Christian world's a much bigger place. Well, I have some good news and some bad news for you. And the news is that the good news and bad news are the exact same. Like many of us would love, the good news is that I have finally found the earliest Christian church. The bad news is, if you have a vision of a pure, untainted church that existed with no disagreement and ne'er a problem in the world, it never existed. The bad news is that the very earliest Christian church looks exactly like the Christian church of today. There are new elements, this digitizing. Talking to pastors and preachers and priests every day at work, I hear them all saying the same thing. They're learning how to commingle their fellowship aspect and evolve discipleship to include this digitizing. Well, today I want to tell you a little story about how this early church started, what happened, where did all the fighting come from, and why are we still fighting? What's going on? Why? This is God. I got to tell you the truth. It makes complete sense. It looks like God visited us 2,000 years ago, came into our ant farm, tried to explain to us what to do, and we've been trying to figure it out ever since. There's another famous saying that the road to hell is paved with the best of intentions. If you want to learn, I always suggest starting with the Bible. This is one narrative from beginning to end. It's the story of the redemption of humankind. But let me tell you how this Christian movement starts, and then I'll fast forward us to today, and you'll see what I'm talking about. 33 AD, roughly, in the way we date things today. We date things today based on a calendar system developed by a dude named Dionysius Exiguus in about the 400s or 500s AD. He is the one who came up with this idea of, hey, we'll put 0 in the middle, anything before it will be BC, anything after it will be AD. Dionysius Exiguus is around in the 400s or 500s AD, right as Rome is collapsing totally in the West. Now, in 33 AD, Jesus Christ lives his life in a place called Palestine, has a 3-year ministry, picks up about 12 disciples and 70 other disciples that are willing to help out. He has a 3-year ministry. He is crucified by the powers that be. He dies. He is buried. He rises from the dead. He spends 40 days with his apostles, now 11, the one that betrayed him and killed himself. After this 40 days, he ascends into heaven. There's a total of about 500 Christians living in Jerusalem at this time. There's not Christianity anywhere else in the world. 9 days after Jesus had gone up to heaven, this day called Pentecost came, and they were blessed with the Holy Spirit. People from all over the world were in this remote Roman province. Peter preached to them and converted 3,000 people. From there, Christianity, this movement began. This message from Jesus about humankind and how we can be made right with God began. A part we don't often consider. As we cross from one border into another, from one land into another, the people speak a different language. As we cross the sea to the small island across the Mediterranean, it's a different culture. But Christianity is spread by a variety of tongues and a variety of means. The book of Acts tells us this story. Philip gets lucky and the royal entourage of Ethiopia is traveling back south, and the eunuch hears the word of God and the gospel of Jesus, and he's baptized on the spot, and he takes it back to Ethiopia, and it is spread there. In fact, Matthew himself later goes to Ethiopia. But you see, what would happen is Christianity spread like wildfire for about 100 years. A period of time of about 12 Roman emperors. Sometimes they were persecuted, right? This is Judaism. It's a sect of Judaism. There's a Jewish problem. F.F. Bruce, the great scholar, tells us in the papers of Claudius. We can read Claudius looking and talking to the government in Alexandria saying, how are we going to deal with this Jewish problem? The Jewish problem is Christians. They go to a Gentile part of the world where they say, yes, yeah, baptize me in the name of Jesus Christ. But then they want to incorporate their own unique cultural and language elements. And you end up with, bingo, heresies. What's a heresy? Well, a heresy is when you don't follow exactly what you were taught by the one that learned it. You make little changes to it. It's a very normal reaction. And we have to remember, when these quote-unquote heresies would happen, it's not like there was a battle between the good guys and the bad guys. The good guys, the orthodoxy, the bad guys, the heretics, and the heretics would lose and they would go, you're right, we were wrong, we're just going to follow you from now on. No, they would continue to thrive and grow and survive. And they were there from the very earliest time in Acts 15. The very apostles are arguing about the incorporation of Gentiles into this sect of Judaism. Christianity wasn't a sect of Judaism. What are you talking about? Read Acts 2:46. It says that James and his clan went to the temple daily to pray. What were they doing in the Jewish temple praying? Why was the royal entourage on their way back from Jerusalem? Because they went there every year praying. You see. So you have two things happening. Some of these heresies, the Nicolaitans, they incorporated some idol worship into the new Christian message. By the mid-100s, you have Valentinius coming up with what we would call Gnosticism. You can only get there by a secret knowledge. You have a gentleman named Marcion coming with something called Docetism. All these are different people sitting down and looking at the Christian message as it was delivered to them and wondering about the God of the universe, just like we do today. There were denominations just like there are today. Now, we look to an era in history for Americans, and this is why the message pertains to you. Reformation Day, October 31st, there's a 500-year history since Martin Luther stood up against those evil papists and told them what was up. Only, that's not the truth. The truth is there had always been groups of separatists. We can read about them in the Bible itself. Now the Reformation comes about, which, believe it or not, is part supernatural. The church is punished. The church is punished for hundreds of years of corruption. A lot of people died at the hands of the Roman Catholic Church. But they weren't the only ones on the planet. By that point, you had Eastern Orthodox, Coptic, Ethiopian Orthodox, Persian Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox. Not to mention hundreds of other denominations of Christians happily practicing every week, trying to make themselves better people through some form of Christian-rooted teaching. It looked slightly different along the edges, but once you laid the books side by side, you could see, oh, they all believe virtually the same thing about the teachings of Jesus Christ, the time that God came down into our ant farm and tried to tell us how to get it right. You have one side that looks at the reformers and says, these heretics. Well, the reformers were nothing but Catholic priests that essentially sent in-house memos up the chain regarding a practice called indulgences and some behaviors by what had become a very corrupted papacy during a period called the Italian Renaissance for discussion among their pupils. Their messages got hijacked by the developing nation-state system in Western Europe of countries, and it became a way for monarchs and governments to finally stand toe-to-toe with the power of the secular aspect of the Roman Catholic Church. You see, the Roman Catholic Church is two things. It is certainly a spiritual, universal church for Christianity, but it is also a secular operating government with its own country. Now, the Vatican doesn't come about till much later, but they operate the same way each time. And if you follow the teaching of Sir John Glob about the life cycle of civilizations, about every 230 years, one comes and falls. Well, they've done that 10 times. So the reformers' message gets hijacked. These reformers are all Catholic priests. But why at this point? Well, the development of humanism, right? People start writing about themselves and wondering about things. If you've ever learned the history of Western music, it begins this way. First there was Gregorian chant in the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, and then the Italian Renaissance came, and the question was, why can't we sing about love? Something very similar happened. So anyway, these monarchies now have a way to power balance against Rome, right? I think people fail to understand just how devastated the Roman Catholic Church was during this time. While many other orthodoxies of Christianity around the world were doing just fine, many other denominations were doing just fine, living their daily lives. Luther would come to regret what had happened. John Calvin actually found himself somehow involved in the government of Geneva and making decisions about capital punishment and whether or not to kill individuals. This is not what was intended. But the Catholic Church responds. By this point, a propaganda machine began like no other, and it was from these monarchies about the evil papists. Well, you get a Pope Paul III, who had been the treasurer for Rodrigo Borgia, Pope Alexander VI, and had spent his life in the College of Cardinals from a young age, and had served in every type of papal administrative position. In one hand, there's nobody better suited to kick off these councils of Trent, what will be the Counter-reformation, where now counter-propaganda comes out, and a reaffirmation of what the Catholic faith will be comes out. These are the lines and lineages that come into America. Now fast forward to today. We have a digitizing happening, where everybody wants to be a reformer of their own absolute truth. But 90% of us don't even have the most basic foundation of church history. Lay people, much less pastors and priests. We've been lied to. I will grant every pastor that's out there from any denomination a pass. I know you have the best of intentions. I know you only had so much education. I know you only had so much time, and it was more important to get the message of Jesus Christ into people. And then, when you had to start dealing with funerals and grief and families and baptisms, it got harder and harder, and there's not a lot of money in it. And we're sinners too. How do we do it? It's not easy. And in this 30-year period of digitizing, now the church in the West is learning for the first time, and guess what? There's more than 66 books in some Bibles. Some Orthodox Christian faiths have up to 93. We call them different things. Pseudepigrapha, which is Jewish narrative history. Apocrypha, the canon of Scripture. And some people shut it off right here. What? More than 66 books? No, shut him off. I'm telling you the truth. I happen to be a person who was born again. I was raised as a Catholic in the church, but I kind of drifted away. I was out conquering the world in my 20s, and if you'd have asked me if I was a Christian, I would have said yes, but it didn't mean anything. And at some point in my life, I hit my lowest, and I was a broken shell of a nothing, and God saved me. And on a journey, I found out that I had been born again. So I read this. Then I went around to all the denominations and found who was talking about this experience that I had had. And I found one, and for a couple years I landed there and learned a ton. But that wasn't the end of the road, right? It's all about this journey I'm telling you about right now. We have got to stop arguing cessationism of spiritual gifts versus continuation. Arminian versus Calvin. Monergism versus synergism. These are all fascinating topics to study, but we don't have to attack each other with them. That was the problem with the church the whole time, is that it's human run and we're humans, and what do? We attack each other, and we're mean, and we can be nasty. And the first time you bring up the word unity in the West, they go, oh, ecumenism, ecumenism. He's trying to make everybody go back to Rome. I'm not trying to make you go anywhere. I'm telling you the truth. I open books and I read them to you and I tell you what they say. When you watch videos on my channel, I'll tell you how I break down what I do. I do consult this first because I am in fact a Christian, and only an idiot would say they were a Christian and then put out a video where they haven't consulted this first and prayed that something useful comes from it. Then I consult church history. Then I consult secular history. Then I consult the apostolic fathers and the church fathers. And I read. You gotta read. This gotcha version of I'm going to nail you with this point about this topic and, take this one verse out of context. The worst thing that ever happened to this Bible was that it was broken down into verses where you can take one sentence, mix it with another from this and half from that, and all of a sudden you've got a new doctrine. No, read the book and see what the book says and let the book speak for itself. The sources I choose are governed by what's called the evidentiary method, which is what has been used in academics for centuries to uphold whether or not something is valid. Oh, well, those are just forged. They're all forged. The only problem with that theory is all these books, these histories, have prefaces and editor's notes where they say, hey, when we were working through this, we found that this couldn't have been true because this person wasn't alive till then, and it was clear that this person kind of just wanted everybody to believe this earlier than it really happened. They tell us the truth about it, and then they give us footnotes where we can go and read these things. There is a way to understand the history of the church from day one through the present and get a good foundation where everything fits in place, but we have to do this work in this digital world. One, we have to be open-minded without being afraid. When I talk to Christians who are afraid about what I have to say, I know that they don't really believe what they say they believe. If you really believe Jesus Christ is the Messiah and that he can save, why do you care about flipping over every rock in this field of truth and seeing what's really underneath of it? You shouldn't care at all. You should be excited to do it. What, are you afraid you're going to find that it's not true? Then you don't have any faith at all. Sorry, and not to be offensive. And in the digital field, drop the ego. Ask yourself how you handle being disagreed with. Ask yourself how you handle being offended. If you can handle both those things, you can go on this journey. Why should I? What do I get out of it? That's the American question. It does change life, because in addition to this evidentiary method producing objectively factual data, volumes, a lifetime, I will never read all the books on my shelves, people. There's also subjective experiences that happen, changes of the heart. God takes out the heart of stone, puts in a heart of flesh. He turns on the Wi-Fi, you see. Then in prayer, it becomes discussions. And the next thing you know, you got to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Doesn't just sound like empty rhetoric. It becomes a real thing because you do have to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. The gospel is the truth. It's been the truth since day one. No church council ever convened and said, you know what? This whole thing's bogus, guys. We got to sort this out and figure out how this lie ever happened. No, it was, how can we properly define what happened and encapsulate it in such a way that we can put it into human words so that it can be taught to the masses of people to their benefit. I got a secret for you Protestants. I'm one of you. I got a secret for you. You blame Constantine for taking over the church and ruining it and making it some Roman pagan thing. It was 100 times worse in the years leading up to the Council of Nicaea. And I'll prove it to you if you keep watching my videos. 100 times worse. Because what was there to stop? Valentinius from popping up in the middle of the 100s with some crazy ideas, people. Crazy to us, not crazy to him. He was a Greek. And so he explored this concept of the logos and aeons of time, right? So to him it made sense, but you'd end up with these weird beliefs after it. And the supernatural aspect of it, which I'm sorry, folks, I'm telling you, does deal with the stuff in Genesis about the fallen angels and the Nephilim and the war to tamper with human DNA for the benefit of someone other than God. That war has been going on. The war has been won. The veil in the temple was torn. We have a route to God who can have perfect justice and be a perfect God who knows everything and who knows us and can still have justice for all the violations we commit on a daily basis, yet still be merciful to us. You can read all about it in Romans chapter 3. For me, after seminary, I was so disappointed because I graduated with like a 4.0, And look, you can say, oh, there's all these paper mill universities where you just pay for a degree. You're right, there's tons of them. And there's a lot of people out there that get the books, fudge the tests, buy the paper, and then get in a pulpit and deceive people. It's all about the condition of the heart and the mind. I wanted to know the truth because I knew he was real, because he had revealed himself to me. He had saved me at the lowest point in my life. Now I know he's real, so what he says must be real too. Let's find out what the truth about Christianity is. And after 7-8 years into it, folks, I'm at this place. At first, it was Truth First Christianity, separating the objective and factual from the subjective and traditional for the benefit of our faith. Now it's narrative apologetics tools for a post-Christian missions field. And it involves a digitized world. And it involves us being willing to unify somehow in this digital world to teach this ancient material that will be otherwise lost that contains the truth. You think the whole world is at your fingertips, but you have to know to look for it. You have to know that a book called Against Heresies exists. You have to know that a book called The Church History of Eusebius exists. You have to know that writings on the Trinity from Athanasius exist. I'm going to stop there, but I want to tell you this. You can support my work. I have a PayPal. You can donate a few dollars. I might buy some groceries with it. I might pay for my website. I might pay myself a little something for the hours of research. I'm not going to drive a Ferrari or a plane or boast about it. I'm going to hit my knees in prayer and thank God if you give me $5 and move on about my life. We have a Cashapp and Venmo, Patreon, and YouTube. You can become a channel member. We have tiers of support. You can purchase one of the books I've written, Amazon.com/author/Nicholasdgarrett. We've got the Just Tell Me the Truth About Christianity series. Just Tell Me the Truth About the Reformation and Counter-reformation's written, being edited, and I'm going to write an easy church history that can be put in everybody's hand, and I'm going to do that in the next year for all of you, because I love you and I care about you, because you have a soul. You have a soul. We shouldn't be living in pain and anger and anguish and fear. If you're living that way, something's wrong. Turn to God. I'm telling you, he's there, man. I do not have theological pre-commitments. If you come at me with a doctrine, I'm most interested in why that doctrine exists, where it comes about, what the other side has to say, and that's interesting. Jesus saving me, he didn't ask me which doctrines I believed in. We made doctrines, and doctrines have been made from day one. From the very first day Peter and Paul started preaching the gospel around. I love you. I hope your work bears fruit. I hope if you're suffering that you'll listen, because everything I'm giving you can lead to tangible changes in your life, which is another fact, another reason I know narrative apologetics can help get us there, because it will lead to direct changes in life that improve the manageability of life, which make us happier. I'm not telling you you're going to be happy all the time, and the Bible doesn't tell you that. God's not an ATM machine, and God's not a feeling meter. Used to be a famous portrait, Footprints in the Sand, and you know what it said? Where were you When I needed you most, there was only one set of footprints. It's because he was carrying us. I love you. I'll see you on the next one, friends. Talk to you soon. Sunday Night Live. Check that out.